Antarctica, a frozen world that holds more than 60% of the planet's freshwater. This icy landmass, untouched by human hands for millennia, is a vital part of Earth's climate system. But what if, in an instant, all of the ice covering Antarctica were to melt? A world that has remained locked in time for millions of years would be transformed into something unrecognizable. The question is no longer theoretical. As global temperatures rise, the possibility of such a catastrophic event is becoming more and more real. Imagine, for a moment, that the frozen heart of Antarctica begins to thaw, not over thousands of years, but all at once. The ice sheets, glaciers, and ice shelves that form the icy exterior of this continent would simply vanish. The Antarctic ice sheet holds approximately 90% of the world's freshwater. If all the ice were to melt, the consequences would be beyond anything we have experienced in modern history. But it's not just about the disappearance of the ice itself. It's about the profound ripple effects this would have on our planet's oceans, ecosystems, and ultimately, our very way of life. To understand what would happen, we need to imagine the sheer scale of the impact. Antarctica's ice covers an area of about 5.4 million square miles, 14 million square kilometers. If it were to melt entirely, it would raise global sea levels by an astonishing 200 feet, 60 meters. Imagine a world where coastlines no longer exist as we know them. Entire cities and countries would be submerged. Places like New York, Miami, London, and Shanghai, along with vast swathes of land, would be lost to the sea. Imagine that moment. The world's coastal cities, home to billions of people, begin to vanish beneath the rising oceans. The famous skyline of New York, the beaches of Miami, the sprawling metropolis of Tokyo, all would be at risk. Low-lying island nations like the Maldives, Kiribati, and the Marshall Islands would be completely wiped off the map as the ocean surges higher and higher. Entire regions, once teeming with human life, would become nothing more than sunken relics, submerged beneath water. The lives of millions, perhaps billions, would be forever altered as homes, infrastructure, and agriculture are lost to the rising tide. It would mark one of the greatest human migrations in history as people flee the encroaching seas in search of higher ground. The effects wouldn't stop at the coastlines. As the waters rise, the effects of the flood would reach deep inland, ravaging farmlands, displacing communities, and triggering catastrophic food shortages. Many regions that depend on coastal trade, agriculture, and industry would collapse. Global supply chains would be disrupted, economies would crumble, and the political landscape would shift as nations scramble to address the damage. But what about the climate itself? Antarctica plays a crucial role in regulating the Earth's temperature. Its massive ice sheets reflect sunlight, helping to keep the planet cool. If that ice were to melt, the Earth would absorb far more heat. Without the reflective surface of the ice, darker ocean waters and land would absorb heat, raising global temperatures even further, a dangerous feedback loop that accelerates the process. As the ice melts, global temperatures would rise even more dramatically. The Earth's heat balance would be altered, leading to more extreme weather events. Heat waves would become more frequent and intense, sweeping across continents. Hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones would become stronger, fueled by the excess heat absorbed by the oceans. Floods and droughts would devastate regions that were once stable. Areas that relied on regular rainfall could face catastrophic water shortages, while regions that were once drought-prone could see intensified storms and floods. In addition to the storms, the collapse of the ice sheets would disrupt ocean currents. Antarctica's ice plays a role in driving the deep ocean currents that regulate global climate patterns. If that ice disappeared, it would slow down or alter the flow of these currents, potentially creating dramatic shifts in regional climates. Some areas could become much colder, while others, like Europe, could face scorching heat. The world's oceans would feel the impact as well. As the ice melts, fresh water would pour into the ocean, lowering its salinity and altering the balance of marine life. Species that depend on cold waters, like krill, would see their habitats destroyed. This would disrupt the food chain, leading to the collapse of fisheries that billions of people rely on for food. Coral reefs, already under threat from warming oceans, would experience further stress as the influx of fresh water disrupts their delicate ecosystems. In addition, the rising ocean temperatures would threaten marine life, creating what we call marine heat waves, unprecedented temperature spikes that could wipe out entire ecosystems. Oceans are not just a source of food, they're essential for regulating the global climate and absorbing carbon dioxide. The collapse of marine ecosystems could have long-term effects on the planet's ability to manage its carbon balance. The social and economic fallout of such a disaster would be nothing short of catastrophic. Millions of people would be displaced, forced to migrate inland, or even across borders. Entire countries would struggle with the sudden influx of refugees, while nations that were once global powerhouses would find their infrastructure and resources overwhelmed. As coastal cities flood and nations scramble to manage the crisis, the very fabric of society would be tested as people fight for survival, resources, and shelter. The international community would have to come together, but would it be enough? The politics of climate change are already fraught with division, and a crisis of this magnitude could intensify existing tensions between nations, making cooperation even more difficult. It's not just humanity that would face this catastrophe. Animals, too, would be forced to adapt. As ecosystems are disrupted, species would either be driven to extinction or forced to migrate to new, uninhabitable places. Many would not survive the rapid pace of change. The Earth's delicate web of life, once perfectly balanced, would be thrown into chaos. The melting of Antarctica's ice sheet would be the harbinger of a new era, one in which the climate becomes more unpredictable, ecosystems collapse, and the survival of species, including our own, becomes uncertain. This is not a distant future. This is the potential reality we face if we continue to ignore the warnings of climate scientists. Antarctica's ice sheet is melting right now, slowly but steadily, and as global temperatures rise, this process accelerates. The melting of all of Antarctica's ice would be the greatest climate disaster humanity has ever faced, and we are standing at the precipice of that disaster. But it's not too late. While the tipping point may be closer than we think, there are steps we can take. By reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning to renewable energy, and taking serious action to mitigate climate change, we can still reduce the severity of these impacts. It's not just about saving Antarctica. It's about saving our planet, our way of life, and ensuring that future generations inherit a world that is habitable, sustainable, and safe. The question is not if we can stop this, it's whether we have the will to do so. The time to act is now. Together, we can shape a future where the melting of Antarctica's ice remains a distant, avoidable threat. It's up to us to change the course of history and build a world that is resilient to the challenges of climate change.